Sorry for this. Sorry for this uncontrolled technical issue. While we are very active in the international level, we are also very active in the national and regional level. We are in about 172 countries, and we have more than 62 chapters around the world. Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing the official website of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, and also for sharing our communication channels. For more information, or for those who are not yet members of this community, please check the link that my colleague Andrea will be sharing it in the chat box to sign up and to join your local or your national chapter. We also ask you all to join our communication channels, where we are very active in these platforms, including Instagram, Twitter, which is the X now, and Facebook, and also TikTok. You can also check our work that we are doing in all over the world. As I said before, international level, national and local level, but by just put the hashtag youth into action, and you are going to see a bunch, I can say tons of activities on the ground, projects led by young people like you in their community, and they are trying to change the reality and also to live in harmony with nature. And next slide, please. Okay, this webinar will be about the COP16 that's held in Cali, Colombia, just a few, I can say few days or maybe few months in October in Cali, Colombia, in a beautiful country, on a beautiful city. In this webinar, we are going to share the outcomes or the updates post, during, and pre the COP16. When I'm saying pre-COP, which is including the youth summit, we are going to share about the youth summit and policy updates, the youth pavilions, youth day, youth actions, side events, communication updates, all our involvement during the COP16. We will also, of course, open the floor for Q&A, which are the questions and answers and comments, of course. And also, we are going to share with you some updates and exclusive next steps. Thank you so much. The next slide, please. Okay. I will give the floor to my colleague Sefa, who is going to share with us an introduction or an overall overview about what's happened during the COP16. Thank you so much. I will give the floor to Sefa.
Thanks, Fatima. Actually, this will be taken by Aitor.
Okay. Okay,
No
sorry.
problem.
Okay, please. Hater, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Fatima. Pleasure to be here with you today. I'm sorry that my connection is not that good, so I will keep my camera closed. But thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Aitor, I'm Given Policy Co-Coordinator. I'm going to give this brief introduction about COP16. Next slide, please. So, as you know, we are here today to talk about COP16, the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity. It was held in Cali, Colombia from 21 of October to November 1st of this year. COP, just to remember, is the high decision-making body for the Convention on Biological Diversity. Next slide, please. The Convention on Biological Diversity, or the CBD, it's a multilateral environmental agreement that what set the global governance for biodiversity, with either space where parties, which means that the countries that are signature of this convention, have a space to negotiate upon the global governance of biodiversity. CBD have three main objectives. The first one is the conservation of biodiversity. The second one is the sustainable use of the components of biodiversity. And the third one is the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. Next slide, please. The CBD organizes itself in frameworks, which are basically the guidelines that will guide the convention, usually for 10 years. At the end of COP15, the end of the year of 2022, we have approved the Common Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the GBF. The GBF is the current framework that set us a 2030 mission to halt and reverse biodiversity loss, and a 2050 mission to living in harmony with nature. It organized 4 goals and 23 global targets, and also have section C, that is the section for considerations for implementation, where we have most or some of our main flags as human rights, intergenerational equity, diversity as values, and so on. Next slide, please. As we used to say, COP16 is just a part of a long process. So COP16 it starts at least in the previous COP at the end of 2022, when they approved the Common Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And from the next 2 years, the intersection of period, we had different meetings from the CBD where we were organizing and reunited to discuss the different agenda items that were being built to be negotiated at COP16. So as you can see, we have different agendas considering SBTA meetings, that is the subsidiary body, and technical and technological advisory. The SPIs, that is the subsidiary body on implementation, and also different expert group meetings that was also designated particular topics to be discussed and to further develop to be able to be negotiated on COP16. So it's important to remember, this is a long-term process. Most of the agendas that are being discussed, or that was discussed in COP16, they were actually being built in the 2 previous years. And this is huge part of the important process for us to also be involved, and we are involved during all this process in the meetings, bringing out our priorities and advocacy work on the ground. Next slide, please. COP16 have had a particular frame or a slogan that was peace with nature, and they also trying to conciliate this with the COP of the people. Peace with nature, as proposed by Susanna itself, the presidency of the COP, is a way to see 3 different approaches for having peace with nature, which means that one is considering having peace with nature for all our economic and financial systems that are currently driving biodiversity loss. Second is reshaping our values and the human-nature relationship to try to figure out different approaches and different ways, different values to integrate and to be embedded with nature and understand the nature also as part, as part as a broad system. And third, to consider the different wars and genocides that we are having all over the world that impact nature itself, but also impact humans and humans' relationship with nature. So considering these 3 approaches, peace with nature was bring as a slogan for COP16. And also COP16 was embedded in other momentos of the year, as we had synergies, considering that in the same 2024 year, we also had the UNFCCC COP29, the climate one, and the UNCCD, the desertification COP16 that is just finishing also this week. And furthermore, we have Latin American leadership, as we had COP16 being held by Colombia. Now the next climate COP, COP30, is going to happen in Brazil. And we also had this year the G20, that is the group of the main 20 economies, chaired by Brazil as well. So it was a way in our discussions where Latin America had a lot of leadership and also to build this common momentum for bringing attention for our subcontinent. Next slide, please. And we, as given, we were there, and we are going to share a little bit about the updates regarding our presence during COP. Next slide, please. And I will give the floor to Sefa. Thank you.
No, and not me. Back to Fatima.
Oh, back to Fatima, sorry.
Thank you so much, Hater, for being on time. Thank you for sharing this overview regarding the COP16, which is the COP of people or People's COP. Our next part will be, or next intervention will be with our speaker, Esteban, the co-coordinator for Gibbon, Colombia. Please, Esteban, are you with us? Esteban, can you hear me?
Yes, Fatima, I'm here.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Esteban. Please, the floor is yours, and please be on time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fatima. Well, yeah, I want to share, I want to say hi, first of all, to all my colleagues, members of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network too. Good morning, good afternoon. Well, after the COP16 in Cali, we had the launch of the Global Summit, the Global Youth Biodiversity Summit, a historic gathering that brought together over 600 participants from around 50 countries. This summit culminated in the development of a powerful collective manifesto offering inputs for the policy recommendations and for the implementation of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framing 2. The summit was inaugurated by Colombia's Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development, Susana Muhammad, the Minister of the International Affairs, Guillermo Murillo, and the Secretary of the Convention, Madame Shokoman, whose words resonated deeply with the participation about the responsibility that lies youth with the conservation, the generations who have contributed to this situation too, and a message of unity that is vital for mobilizing the grassroots in for life, and a possibility where we can start building peace in the territories, and peace with nature, and peace among ourselves too. During the summit, participants shared inspiring organization experience from their territories, contributing ideas and creating interactive learning spaces. These contributions will enrich all the discussions towards the agendas of COP16 during the 2 weeks, ensuring that the voices of the youth are heard in the green zones and the blue zones, and at the countries and the conference of the parties. This summit was part of the COP16 youth and children strategy that was worked together hand by hand by the Ministry of the Environment and the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, that includes events and initiatives designed to amplify the perspective of young people. According the summit position of Colombia that had a leadership with Xiomara Acevedo, the coordinator of GB Colombia, and the position as we're trying to mobilize and drive as a youth driving biodiversity action. We try to highlight it that young people have both the responsibility and the power to lead the transition towards a future in a harmony with nature. The Global Summit is complemented by a series of preparatory events, including local gatherings, self-managed programs, and the National Youth and Children Summit of Climate and Biodiversity too, held in Cali, the 16 to 18 in Bogota. So we had two possibilities to gather on the national and the international level, including Jimmy in Colombia and other platforms and other organizations and movements from Colombia and the region. This was a event led by the Colombian chapter and created a space for international and local children and youth to meet and share their experience and vision to live in peace with nature. And moreover, we collaborated with many partners to include children in the youth.
Sorry, Esteban, can you
Yes.
please make it brief because we are running out of time? Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm just a little bit emotional. Sorry, yeah, but yeah, this was an amazing trail, and we will like to share more outputs, of course, of this Global Youth Biodiversity Children and Youth Summit,
Yeah.
and of course, pictures and videos will be launched here with Jimin with all.
Thank you so much, Esteban. What's a huge success for the Youth Summit. That was just right before the COP16 began. Congratulations for this. And yes, after sharing the overview or the context about the COP16 and the Youth and Children's Summit, we are going to dive a little bit deeper and share with you more about negotiations, especially the policy. I will give the floor to Sefa from the Philippines and Hacher from Brazil to share with us what's happened during the COP16, especially from the youth lens and yes, our priorities as community. Thank you so much. Over to you, Sefa.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Esteban, for sharing about the Youth Summit, which was really a good, very colorful and vibrant way to dive into the negotiations because it happened right before COP16 started. So yeah, we'll be sharing updates on policy. My name is Sefa from the Philippines, and I'm the policy co-coordinator together with ATAR. And just before that, I just want to share that like a bit about what the Global Youth Biodiversity Network actually does when we go into CBD meetings. It's a lot of work. We engage in the negotiations in many ways, including through interventions, through lobbying, and meeting with our negotiators, through tracking the negotiations, taking notes, and figuring out what is going on. Thank you to everyone who helped with that. We held we held press conferences, which you'll hear about later. We also had a given policy team that was doing preparations even months before the COP. And then we, of course, also engage in many important discussions about biodiversity and different themes about biodiversity through side events and parallel events. We also had many youth spaces to engage with all the actors who were at the COP, including the pavilion and the summit. We held youth coordination meetings during the mornings to prepare ourselves for the day, to answer any questions and update ourselves on what is going on with the negotiations. We built partnerships and alliances while we were there as well, because the COP is really a place for many actors to gather. We did actions and also, of course, just being there, observing and learning the process, and seeing how the negotiations are relevant to our work. So yeah, youth engagement in CBD policies is really diverse. And we really, first of all, would like to thank everyone who was there tracking, lobbying, keeping themselves updated even online, advocating for youth priorities even way before the actual COP. So yes, thank you so much to everyone who has engaged. Today we'll be sharing a bit more about what we achieved, but just again, for the preparations, we developed before the COP a list of youth priorities where we gathered the recommendations that were gathered through consultations with the given community and through also the preparations and analysis by the given policy team. So this is the given policy team that were selected through an open application process, and were selected to follow specific themes in the COP agenda and do intensive preparatory work in order to analyze the documents, align positions with the consultations, and also follow the negotiations during the COP itself. So we also thank them for the hard work, again, many months before the COP. And then we will be sharing more detailed information about the negotiations in a full report that is coming soon. Not just the negotiations, but also everything that Gibbon has done. So please stay tuned for this. We will announce it on social media. But this is just to say that we can't go into too much detail during this webinar. But yeah, stay tuned for this document, which we'll be releasing soon. And here's maybe a preview also of how the negotiations went. For those who are following policy, this was keeping us sane and happy during the negotiations that were sometimes not going well. Is we had a Telegram chat just to share our policy memes. And yeah, just try to make light of actually the very sometimes difficult things that were happening, like and also how slow sometimes the negotiation was happening. So yeah, thank you to everyone who made the memes. But again, it really kept us sane, and they were all very creative. I think many of these might have been Gretel or Abby. So yeah, thank you. So this is the COP agenda. There was a lot of things on the agenda. So let's just go through it a little bit. First of all, in terms of implementing the Global Biodiversity Framework, they talked about a lot of things, including the progress on updating their national biodiversity strategies and action plans. They discussed the monitoring framework as well as the mechanisms for planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. They discussed resource mobilization and the financial mechanism. They discussed capacity building and knowledge management. They talked about cooperation with other conventions. They talked about communication, education, and public awareness. They talked about what is needed to support the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And they talked about mainstreaming biodiversity within and across different sectors. And then they also talked about a number of different scientific and technical agenda items, like the diverse values of biodiversity, sustainable wildlife management, marine and coastal and island biodiversity. They talked about invasive alien species, biodiversity and health, plant conservation, synthetic biology, and biodiversity and climate change. Okay. And then they talked about a few other things that are separate from these in terms of just how to explain what they are. So they talked about digital sequence information and the benefit sharing from the use of DSI, so what we call DSI. And we'll talk more about this item later on. They also talked about Article 8J, which is the article of the convention that talks about the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities. Yeah, and all things about how indigenous peoples and local communities participate in the convention and what parties are supposed to do in relation to this. And then finally, they also talked about what the COP will do next through the multi-year program of work on the COP. So that's a heavy agenda. We won't touch too heavily on all of them, but we do want to share what were the key policy outcomes from the COP. So what did this COP really achieve? The first big thing is that they established what they call the Kali Fund. It's the fund that is about sharing the benefits from the utilization of digital sequence information. So for the first time, they now have a multilateral mechanism between different countries in order to share benefits, or for example, monetary benefits like profits, or I think mainly monetary benefits coming from digital sequence information, which is the digital version of genetic sequences essentially, and which many use in to for many industries use, for example, medicine, or for food, for example. So because many companies and countries profit from this, this is a mechanism to make sure that those benefits are shared equitably to the communities and to the countries where that digital sequence information was taken. So that's a big thing that this COP managed to adopt, and we'll share more about that later. They also Another big achievement from this COP has been the establishment of a permanent subsidiary body on for indigenous peoples and local communities. So for more than 20 years, the CBD had an ad hoc or a temporary working group on indigenous peoples and local communities and Article 8J. But now they finally established that this will be permanent, okay? Like Substan SBI, and that this will be a space to discuss issues regarding indigenous peoples and local communities and how this interfaces with the convention. They also established a program of work on Article 8J. So it's a whole program of work for the coming years for parties, for communities, for the whole of society, really, to support the role and contributions and respect the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities when it comes to biodiversity. So that's the second one. They also adopted a decision recognizing the role of people of African descent in biodiversity conservation. So this is also a first. And then after 8 years of negotiations, they also adopted the modalities on EBSAs, or ecologically and biologically significant marine areas. So that's another one. They also adopted the Global Plan of Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health. We also know that 44 countries have submitted their NBSAPs, which is not a lot. That was their deadline, but that's how many. They also recognized in a decision the synergies between biodiversity and climate, and then they also decided the next host of the COP, which is Armenia. Okay, so just for you to know, some of you might be really interested in this. These are the countries that have submitted their NBSAPs. You can find more information on this website to see if your country was one of those, ort.cbd.int. And these are the ones that submitted their national targets that are aligned with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So not everyone has managed their full NBSAPs, but more countries managed to submit their national targets. Okay, so I'll pass to Aitor to give us some updates. Yeah.
Thank you, Sefa. So a few of the agenda items in more details. One of the agendas, as Sefa mentioned, is the digital sequence information. This agenda particularly focus on the design and the establishment of a fund, a multilateral mechanism that was adopted with the name of Kali Fund, that will deal with the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from the using of digital sequence information on genetic resources. So basically, it's a fund that trying to really gather when private sector, but not only private sector, but in general private sector, are using genetic resources for doing their products or services, and how they are going to return the benefits that are arising from it, which includes financial flows for those countries and communities who are stewarding these genetic resources. This multilateral mechanism would be administered by the United Nations through their Multi-Partner Trust Fund Office. There was an internal discussion if these are going to go to the Multi-Partner Trust Fund Office or to the Global Environmental Facility. We had presentations of both of the institutions during COP16. And at the end, COP decided to choose Multi-Partner Trust Fund Office. They are also decided regarding databases and how the metadata that is associated with the use of traditional knowledge only going to happen with the explicit permission from indigenous peoples and local communities, which include free, informed, and prioritated consent. And also, they discussed it and decided about how resources are going to be allocated. So fund will be prioritized for indigenous peoples and local communities, including women and youth among those communities, considering supporting capacity building, technology transfer, knowledge sharing, and other activities. National entities, which mean countries, they will be the one who will be responsible for the disbursement of the fund, which means that these resources are going to be allocated first for the countries, but directly support for community-driven projects was secured. So these resources need to be also allocated in a community-driven process, and communities need to have access for these resources. And half of these resources will be allocated to self-identified needs for indigenous peoples and local communities, which include women and youth within these communities. So basically, this is the process that was established, remembering that this is a voluntary process, so it's not mandatory, it's not a regulational process, it's a voluntary process where they are trying to access the how private sector will deal with it. So I would consider that this is even an opportunity for now on. We access and understand the participation of private sector in supporting this fund. It can be a really good opportunity to increase the discussions and the evidence on the difference between dealing with voluntary or regulation actions for private sector in general. Next slide, please. One of the main discussions of the COP that have not been decided was the resource mobilization and financial mechanism. So basically, we have two different agendas. The first agenda was the resource mobilization one. Resource mobilization was split in two main discussions. The first one was the resource mobilization strategy. This was discussion that all parties agreed to discuss upon, and they went through the whole process. They discussed the whole resource mobilization strategy. And I would say that we have a good resource mobilization strategy, not perfect, but never perfect, but a good resource mobilization strategy. And we have strong language that we have been working through all the process since the advisory committee on resource mobilizations. So a few of the meanings of the resource mobilization strategy is the inclusion of effect and full participation of indigenous peoples, local communities, women and youth as an enabling condition, which means that this should guide the whole strategy. We have directly mention of direct access and expansion of resources for indigenous peoples, local communities, women and youth, also as an enabling condition. We have section C, which include human rights as a strategy guideline. And here I call this attention that we weak the strategy because we remove multiple references for human rights through all the strategy, and they concentrated section C also as a reference to say that human right should be part of the strategy and included as a guideline. So it's here, but I would say it's more implicit, would make us call us attention to keep looking forward on this. We have some insertions of socio-environmental safeguards language throughout the document, in particular when we are talking about private finance and private flows and different innovative financial mechanisms. And we have been able to remove mentions directly to biodiversity credits. That is still not instrument that have been agreement with local indigenous peoples, local communities, women and youth, and still open too much space for offsetting process. So it's a good also outcome. Other discussion inside of the resource mobilization agenda was the new financial mechanism that also didn't went to a final decision. Here, since the beginning, we have a very polarized process where on one side, developing countries, they were pushing to have a new financial mechanism because they was, one, not happy with the current financial structure that we have, that is mostly the Global Environmental Facility, because they do not have representative, because they have difficulty to access these resources, because they have an implementation process that most times find difficult because they're in the organizations that are agencies of these Global Environmental Facility have too much power also to decide with who or with who not of the countries they will work with. And because this is still a very project-based approach, would make countries that have less experience or less capacity to develop projects to have difficulty to access these resources. So they have a many different types of concerns why they were not happy with it. But on the other side, developed countries, they were happy with the current mechanism, and they were not on the discussion to have a new financial mechanism. So they were happy, and they would also argue hard that there is no fiscal space, so there is no budget inside of their administrative resources, their internal resources of their own countries, to provide extra financial resources for developing countries. So we call the ODA, the Official Development Assistance, was exactly what developed countries was not supportive. So at the end, we have a lot of discussions and it was not approved. The last version of this document was considering to decide, create a financial mechanism and make it operational until 2030. And until 2030, they're going to have a cross-sectoral process to decide how mechanism will operate, what are the modalities of the mechanism, who are the ones who are going to have priority to access these resources, and other structures on how it should be implemented in a way that will respond the demands to everyone. For us, having a new financial mechanism in these discussions was something important that we are still hoping to see happen, as we will have space to also discuss demand for directly access for grassroots organization. The next one is the financial mechanism agenda that was particularly focused on the relation between GEF and GBFF. GEF as the Global Environmental Facility and GBFF as the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. We had a lot of comments on this. I will just call attention for two particular things that main win here is that we are trying to push the reform of the GEF and the GBFF. And now we have two good paragraphs that is encouraging the GEF to explore opportunities to support their partnerships and direct access for indigenous peoples, local communities, women and youth, and also is calling GEF to emphasize effective engagement in decision-making process with indigenous peoples, local communities and youth. Next slide, please. Other agendas items that we have been following is the cooperation with other conventions. Cooperation has in all the three real conventions, which means biodiversity, climate change, and desertification, and try to understand how policies and actions can be designed in a way that is promoting positive outcomes through all the crisis. And we also have a very important win that is an invitation for the Office of the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights to develop tools and guidance on human rights-based approaches for the implementation of the framework. On the agenda of mainstreaming is the agenda that is particularly focused on the relationship between private sector and financial sector with biodiversity. It's a very tricky and difficult agenda. What we have on wins, despite being an agenda that is being very quoted and with a very weak language, is that they are calling that all process regarding mainstreaming should foster full and effective participation of indigenous peoples, local communities, women and youth.
Sorry.
My last
Apologies.
slide.
No, just please, we have the
Slowly.
interpretations. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for this.
Thank you for
Thank,
remembering, Fatima.
thank you so much for understanding. Please go ahead.
And also a second point was an invitation. Now we have a time frame where we have clarity about how this agenda are going to move forward on the next years. So they created a process until COP17 and until COP18, which include for COP17 request for the Executive Secretariat to provide overview of best practices and specific sector communities to try to understand tools, guidances, and what is being already used that's important and effective for the mainstreaming of biodiversity across all sectors. And the other agenda is the diverse values of biodiversity agenda. This was a new agenda that was coming from Substack. They welcome EPB's values assessment, the summary for policymaking, and also key message, noting the relevance of this assessment for the CBD and for the GBF. And they call for the recognition and consideration of the integration of diverse knowledge systems, value systems, worldviews in policymaking and decision-making to leverage transformative change, which means that they are saying that here we need to consider that beyond instrumental values, beyond economic and financial values, we also have intrinsic, the consideration of nature itself, and relational, the way that people all over the world are connecting in different ways with nature, including Mother Earth, and other different cosmovisions, should be considering in the process of decision making. So this is a really, really important approach. Next slide. We also had the Sustainable Wildlife Management Agenda. Two good points on this is that they considering this more interconnected approach for sustainable wildlife management, which include support poverty, secure tenure rights, and equitable access to land, fisheries, forests. And also, they requested the Executive Secretariat to develop global guidance on how sustainable wildlife management should consider inclusive and participatory decision-making, the inclusion of multiple systems of knowledge, and the recognition of the rights, which include land tenure rights, and the equitable distribution of cost and benefits. In this agenda, we also had the removal of direct reference to biodiversity credits, as was the only, namely, financial instrument that was having reference in this document. And biodiversity and climate change was an agenda that also was happening basically through all the negotiation process with a lot of contact groups discussion. We have good and wins here, and also a few losts. But the win part is that they recognize the need for international cooperation and synergies regarding climate actions and biodiversity. So now this is explicitly mentioned. Socio-environmental safeguards are mentioned as urgent to be implemented when taking any climate actions, which include that climate actions must be consistent with Section C. Remember that part of Section C include human right-based approaches and intergenerational equity, and target 22 for the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples, local communities, women, and youth. And also that climate actions must only be pursued with free, prior, and informed consent of indigenous peoples and local communities, and that intergenerational equity should be considering, and this is directly mentioned into the process. It also mentioned that all access we need to manage, avoid, minimize potential adverse impacts on biodiversity and ecosystem integrity. And ecosystem integrity was a concept that was not in the document at the beginning. That is very important to be highlighted here. Next slide. And I give floor back to Stefan.
Thank you, Aitor. And then for a few more items, I want to share also for the ones, for these items, what we achieved in terms of the progress on updating NBSAPs. First of all, we gathered information on how our community has been participating in this process at the national level, and we gathered the data that at least 25 and potentially more national chapters of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network are engaging or have been engaging in their NBSAP updating process at the national level. And we really commend the chapters that have been able to do that. And we encourage other organizations and chapters to do the same, especially if your process is still ongoing. Through our advocacy from SBI, or the subsidiary body on implementation, we were also able to get to contribute to this paragraph, which encourages parties to enable the full and effective participation of women, indigenous peoples, and local communities, youth, civil society, and others in the revision or updating of their NBSAPs through inclusive and transparent modalities. So you can use this again as a reminder to them that this is something that they have agreed to when you try to engage in your NBSAP process moving forward. Item 10 on planning, monitoring, reporting, and review was an item that was not yet adopted. You'll find out why later. But so far, what we have contributed to the decision is guidance for countries on how to follow Section C when it comes to monitoring. So this is available to parties. We also have almost, I think it's almost final that we have a target 22 binary indicator with a series of questions that will assess whether or not countries have structures and processes in place that are in line with Target 22, including children and youth participation, access to justice, and access to information. And then together with allies, we also now have a Target 22 headline indicator on land use change and land tenure. And then we also have an opening for future work. And there's now a paragraph in the decision that allows for youth and others to contribute to any additional indicators that might be available in the future for parties to use. That's good because currently there is a big gap still in the monitoring framework on youth-related indicators. And this is work that we as Gibbon have also been pursuing and continue to do. Okay. So on communication, education, and public awareness, we're actually explicitly mentioned in this paragraph that invites Gibbon, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, and other organizations to collaborate to develop a global plan of action for education and biodiversity, encompassing formal and informal education in order to support the transformative actions needed to implement the framework. So this is a big win because we have a lot to contribute when it comes to this plan. So this is actually something that was proposed for us by Norway in a very late stage of the negotiations when it was almost impossible for youth to make an intervention. A party proposed this on our behalf. And then item 20 on marine and coastal biodiversity. Through our participation in the contact groups, the decisions now recognize the gaps in the work of the CBD with regards to participation, to multiple values of biodiversity, to applying a human rights-based approach, and also on the impacts of geoengineering. And then youth are also considered now in the work of the Sustainable Ocean Initiative. Sorry, just to add that recognizing these gaps are important because it really sets the basis for pursuing future work on these things as the CPD moves forward into implementation. And then on biodiversity and health, again, we adopted a global action plan on biodiversity and health. And through our participation in the process, it also mentions many references to children and youth participation, to intergenerational equity, to human rights, and the right to a healthy environment. Okay, so that's great on our end. Some of you might have participated in the consultation that we did on biodiversity and health, and this is what it has resulted to. And then finally, together with our allies, and really despite opposition from certain parties who continue to speak against human rights in many ways. We successfully advocated to maintain the reference to equity, gender equality, and human rights-based approach as a potential focus for the future work of the convention. And I and yeah, so that's a big step because the CBD recognizes that human rights is something that is in the global biodiversity framework, but not much work has been done on it yet. And so more work needs to be done on it. This is really what we have been pushing. The language is a bit weakened. It says that work could be advanced instead of like work will be advanced. And that was the compromise that was reached. But yeah, this is a big win on our end. Last two slides, I think. I'll pass to Ater because there were some losses, not just wins. Yeah.
Thank you, Sefa. Yes, unfortunately, it's not all about winnings. We also have a few losses and disappointment with COP16, which are both language that was weakened or agenda items that didn't move forward in the direction that we were expecting or advocating for. So one, lack of willingness to compromise for developed countries regarding resource mobilization. As I mentioned, since the beginning, developed countries, they were not supportive to have a new financial mechanism. And even if we already have evidence suggesting $700 billion annually to support biodiversity, we only have the 200 until now that's been going in this direction. So we have a giant lack of financial resources to be provided for biodiversity conservation, and we still do not have any financial mechanisms that are going to address this gap. And even we do not have financial mechanisms that have been properly designed to have more equitable governance structure on the decision-making process or participatory decision-making process for indigenous peoples, local communities, women, and youth to decide what to fund and who should be funded. We have still barriers to reform the GEF governance structure to make it more equitable and representative. As remember, I mentioned that we had a language on meaningful engagement. This is a win, but at the same time, this is a lose as we were fighting in the same paragraph was a huge discussion, and that
I'm sorry, hater. I think that we are losing your voice. Hater,
Ater, can you hear
can
us?
you hear us? I think that hater is facing some connection or internet issues. Hater, can you hear us?
I'll continue then.
Okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
Thank you so
I'll
much,
just
Safa. Over
continue.
to you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So yeah, when it comes to the Jeff, I think the way that the Jeff itself works is not very inclusive, and we've been trying to see how it can change how it's been working so far to be more inclusive and representative, and there was a lot of resistance to that. So the third point here is that language on children, on equity, and on human rights-based approaches continue to be weakened by certain parties. There's a lot of support for it also, which is good because then it makes them less successful in trying to remove that kind of language, but it's still there, and we need to continue to kind of build understanding of these things and show loudly our support for these aspects. There is continued strong presence of the private sector and private sector lobbyists, the private sector as party representatives also at the COP, similar to the climate COP, I suppose. And this really risks the integrity, I suppose, of the decisions that are being made. They are that they represent really, yeah, that they are representing decisions that are from from the people, I suppose. Uh, it's
Sorry,
it's okay, Iter. I'll continue unless you want to
please.
carry on.
No, it's
I'm here.
okay.
I reached here in the private sector presence at the COP. Go for it.
You already talk about the
You
private
can,
sector? Should
yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Stefan. Sorry, I lost my connection. As I mentioned, it was not that good today. Um, so the other topic, as Stefan was mentioned, is this continually strong presence of the private sector and lobbying during COP. It have not strongly reached negotiation so far, but have particularly reached most of side events, which means that a strong language, a strong proposals on false solutions, what we call, or solution or proposals that are not truly addressing drivers of biodiversity loss or that are not addressing human right-based approaches are being included as proposals for dealing with the biodiversity involvement. So we had a lot of presence of private sector dealing particularly with traditional finance, voluntary guidelines, and other approaches that are not going on the same directions, and even proposals that are climate proposals that might be harm to biodiversity at the end. Um, Together, as I mentioned, for solutions was also being pushed outside of negotiations, together with the same strong presence of private sector. So one, as we should mention, is the offset proposals that was appearing through all the COP. So creating unities, tradable units for biodiversity and try to figure out how to create financial flows where you're not recognizing the diversity of nature regarding integrity of the ecosystems, the diverse of ecosystems, but also the whole embedded relationship between nature and people and the different worldviews and the different relations that indigenous people and local communities held in their particular territories. And this absence of transformative change approaches for business and markets to undertake biodiversity mainstreaming. That is, as I mentioned, that mainstreaming is an agenda that is being very cooptated only on voluntary approaches. So we are not still on a moment where we are able to discuss regulation or a multilateral sector approach that's trying to really deal with common policies that will provide more regulation for the different sectors on how they are harming biodiversity. Next slide, please. The final slide on policy side is the status of negotiation. So as you know, we have not reached to the final of COP16. We had over 24 hours of negotiation session until a moment where one of the delegation asked for the president to consult the quorum. And we did not have more the minimal quorum, the minimal number of delegates during the session to be able to keep the negotiations moving forward. So COP16 was suspended around 9 a.m. of the next day. And a few very important decisions were not adopted as resource mobilization, financial mechanism, planning, monitoring, reporting, and review, and the budget for the Secretariat to keep their work on the next 2-year cycle. On a few weeks ago, we had a communication from the Secretariat, CBD Secretariat, that negotiations will resume on 25 to 27 of February in Rome, Italy, on the headquarters of FAO. I think it's very important to understand the difference between what was COP16 and what will be the resumed COP16. And this resumed COP16 will be a very packed meeting with limited capacity on the venue, with only plenary sessions, and with very few negotiations as we are already in advanced stage. As all documents, they are now L documents, which means that are the last phase of documents for the decisions before being agreed. And also, this is a meeting that is not going to hold side events and no other bilateral activities are going to be held. So we are still in dialogue, but it's important to note these differences, in particular, the limited capacity of the venue to be able to support. It's not possible that uh, all this huge COP16 that happened again on Rome in Italy. So Secretariat is also accessing and providing more information on how this process and how it's going to work and limiting the number of everyone that's going to be there. So also we will keep you informed as we are in dialogue. For next slide, please, I give the floor back to Fatima.
Thank you so much, Hater. Thank you so much, Safa, for the hard work, and congratulations for the huge win. And also, I'd like to congratulate also our colleague from Indigenous people, local community, and Afro descent group. Yes, it's not easy. It's a whole process, and the policy team of Gibbon, they're really did the huge work. It was a draining task and time, and the negotiations at the end are at the final plenary at the COP16. Big shout out to the whole team for the hard work and for navigating the whole process. Thank you so much, and looking forward to push more forward and to push really hard for the upcoming session that will be held in Rome, Italy. Yes, we highlighted an overview about the COP16 and the Youth and Children Summit, the policy updates. And now it's time for the group picture. And for the break, please hold your questions and the comments. We will open the window at the end for your reflections, for your questions, and we will give the floor also to our speakers to give an answer. Please, if you can open your cameras that we can see your beautiful faces and your beautiful smiles, that we can have a group picture. Sorry, that's me, the whole. Thank you so much, Sefa. Let's have and memorize this gathering. Okay, let me. Are you ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1. First one. Okay. Okay. Another one, please. Hold with me. We have too many people. Thank you so much for joining. Another one. Please keep your camera on that we can have the picture of all the people here. Last one. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for opening your camera and for sharing your smiles with us. And I think it's time after this intense session from our colleague in terms of policy updates. We will have, or we are going to take 5 minutes break for stretching. And if you would like to grab a coffee or to prepare a quick snack, that we can delve into other sessions or the second part of this webinar that highlights the side events and our engagements, the youth pavilions. So many things and many updates to share with you. Please, we are going to have 5 minutes and we will be back. Thank you so much. Are here again. Thank you so much for joining us again. I will give the floor to the co-moderator for this session, Mark from Philippines, and to share with you and to continue moderating the next parts or the second part of this webinar regarding the side event, the activities, and our engagement during the COP, and also to share the next steps and the COMS updates. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Fatima. Hi, everyone. Good evening from the Philippines. I'm Mark. I'm assisting Given in capacity building. Before we share the other activities of COP16, if you would um, get down to your panel down below and let's send our heart react to our hardworking policy team and all those people who have worked so hard in Cali, Colombia last COP16. So let's just give them our hearts and our congratulations on the big wins on what SEPA and Ether shared with us today on the results of COP. Thank you, the policy team, and to all those youth who have been doing really hard work in Cali on COP16. Thank you, everyone. So let's just give them our heart react now on our panel down below. Okay, thank you everyone to who have joined this webinar. So like what Fatima and Sefa mentioned, aside from tracking and following the negotiations in Cali, we also did several activities that support our priorities in biodiversity conservation work and the meaningful role of youth in those conservation work as well. So we had pavilion work, we had also did side events and parallel events and also some actions during COP16. And to share with us the pavilion and the other activities, I'll call on Gretel. Gretel, are you here to share with us the pavilion? And also we have Andrea to share with us the Youth Day and the actions that we did in Cali, Colombia. Gretel, please.
Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah, so my name is Gretel. I am from the Youth Pavilion team. With me, there's also other people who are helping run this Youth Pavilion. And a huge thank you to our partners who actually participated in our chapters, who also showcase what they have been doing throughout the past 2 years from COP15 to COP16, and also highlighting what they have done. So for this Youth Pavilion, we actually have it at the Place Quebec at COP16 in Cali, Colombia. From the 21st to the 30th, we had a total of 41 events, ranging from panel discussions, networking sessions, and even a documentary screening. It represented youth from all over the world, from North America all the way to Asia, to Europe, to even Africa. The programs were not only done in English, they were done in Spanish, French, and Portuguese too, so that the different delegates, the different youth and the other people there who are not able to speak in English are also able to enjoy our youth pavilion. Yep, it was also one of the busiest space, despite a few modest seats of about 15 seats. For all our events, actually all the seats were filled up, and even people were standing at the back to
Still,
listen.
can you
Yes.
just slow down for the interpretation? Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot. Yeah, so with 15 over seats, they actually people filled up the seats and even stood at the back to listen to the what our youth have to share and what our partners have to share. In addition to the youth pavilion, we had a ofrenda led by the Mexican chapter for the festival Dia de los Muertos to honor the fallen environmental defenders and fallen species. As you can see at the center picture over there, it's such a wonderful session. Before the altar was actually made, like a lot of us came together to actually decorate, and I noticed like everyone coming together, and it was really heartwarming for me personally. Yeah, that's it for Youth Pavilion, and I thank the partners once again so much for helping us, and the Given team for giving us the opportunity to actually lead this pavilion. Yeah.
Thank you, Gretel. And maybe on the next slide, we have Andrea to share the other activities. Andrea, please.
Hola, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Happy to share it that besides the work doing in policy, other young people also boost the actions and spaces like the Youth Pavilion, also in the celebration of the Youth Day and other actions that I will share with you. And a big thank you to everyone who helped us in different ways, from finding and resolve problems that came to also came and listen and share their stories and more. So the Youth Day took place on October 22, and it was from the morning to the afternoon, and try to host a space that we can showcase different conversations and in different spaces and in different approaches. For example, we use art, we use dialogues, we use also panel discussions, and in this one, they were addressing different topics, from indigenous wisdom to peace and nature conversations, to also artivisms. And we also did and navigate a little bit of some of the activities that Given had done during this year, like you will hear more in the next slides, like IYCB side events, etc. And it was very nice to see that these events help to empower and develop more the conversations among different actors. We did have participation from parties, delegates coming to our celebration of the Youth Day. And also we had the participation of the Executive Secretariat, Astrid, to came to this space and share with us. And we appreciate that everyone was involved. We also have different areas I was mentioned, like artivism, where there was some artistic activities that even allow us to interact with people from the staff in the venue, like the fire people, that I don't know how to say bomberos in English now, but they were also coming there. The people who were the volunteers, also they came. They also came to support and help and participate in this event. So it was a very nice, successful day. Thank you to everyone who joined us in these spaces. Part of that, there were also actions. Actions are a part of the negotiations, or maybe side events or activities like the Youth Day. Action tend to be kind of a protest or moments that people gathering to talk or raise awareness or raise concerns about what is happening in the negotiation, or is as a spaces that is used also to came with kind of demands or requests from the civil society, most often to call and keep the attention of the delegation, the parties delegates. And during the COP, there was a different range of activities. Given took the lead in some of them, and in other was a co-leading, and in others just a supporting constituency. And some of the activities that we co-organized, it was the Pops Up. The Pops Up was like basically taking some spaces in the venue to sit, to have live concerts, or to have like seat conversation, or make some exercises as you see in the pictures, to kind of create spaces beyond or different from the negotiations that were happening, and also allocate the people to not disconnect, but maybe kind of open their minds and kind of also address certain conversations that it was difficult to find other spaces to have it. As well, we supported some of the action that was led by the IFB and the group who coordinate indigenous people and local community spaces in CBD, that they also organized to call out to call to the negotiators for these spaces, the SBI, for these topics. And we also, as youth, we were there supporting in this action. And given Brazil, together with other Brazilian organizations, they organized a silent protest, and they took one part of the venue in the Blue Zone to call for this and kind of create a space that people can reflect of what was lacking and what was the kind of the responsibilities and the impact of the decision that was taking place in the negotiation. So we also appreciate that some of the chapter took that initiative, and there was other ones where we were just participating or trying to be part of these actions. And that's all what we have to report in terms of the Youth Day in action. Thank you everyone to support us, and thank you everyone who took pictures and helped us to report.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Gretel. Those are good summary of the VC Day that we have been doing in COP16 in terms of activities. And that's also a good space for everyone to really participate aside from youth and other stakeholders and participants of the COP as well. And we also had side events, which I think Suda and Shruti will be sharing as well. Suda and Shruti, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone, Shruti. So me and Sudha were part of the side events team, and we definitely thank all of the members, especially Mark, who helped design the programs for these side events, and Priska, Abu, and Marie as well, who were part of these side events and helping us organize them. So we had two official side events that were selected by the CBD Secretariat. First one was breaking ground on youth indicators for biodiversity. It was a very important side event in that Gibbon has been working for a long time to make sure that we have youth specific indicators that reflect youth contribution for biodiversity. And this was a space where we were able to present some of the youth related indicators and monitoring elements for biodiversity. And we had uh, two of our chapters, that is Gibbon Paraguay and Gibbon Madagascar, present some of the efforts on how they were able to involve youth in the NBSAP revision process. So a lot of Gibbon national chapters were involved in the NBSAP revision process throughout the last year, but we had two of the chapters present their findings and document their work aligned with the KMGBF. The second one was nurturing intergenerational collaboration with youth for national biodiversity governance and action. So this was a more reflective, open dialogue space where we had youth members from different regions, from Asia, LAC, Pacific, as well as Africa, talk to government representatives from a lot of different governments. For example, I think it's given here, Bolivia, Barbados, Indonesia, and Zimbabwe. And we had open, honest conversation about what are the challenges, what are the best practices, and what are the ways forward for including youth in these national spaces. So we had members reflect, also come up with few solutions, and some of the government representatives also give us their commitment to including youth in some of their decision making processes. Next slide. Yeah, so those were the two official Gibbon side events, and we also partnered with a few other organizations and co-organized some of the other events. One of that was with the World Food Forum, and we had youth leadership and agroecology, catalyzing biodiversity conservation in agri-food systems. So this was more focused on agroecology and agri-food systems. Uh, and this was a space where we brought diverse stakeholders to talk about the importance of agri-food system in biodiversity conservation, and it examined the interconnectedness between these systems.
Shruti, sorry to cut you. Can you speak a bit slower for our interpreter?
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So this was a interconnected space where we examined the importance of agri-food system as well as integrating youth and rights-based approaches to agri-food systems that will help in biodiversity conservation. We also presented the outcomes that World Food Forum did with Gibbon on a thematic assembly or around agri-food systems, and this was presented at the side event. The second one was in partnership with the United Nations University, and here also it was a more open dialogue, a more open discussion rather than a panel discussion, where we had youth government representatives as well as private sector who came together to talk about ways to accelerate youth participation in international decision making spaces. So it was not just talk about the successes, but also the challenges and the barriers, and also the way ahead and important strategies that we need to keep in mind in order to include youth in these different spaces. Yeah, I think I'd give it to Sudha for the next four. Yeah, so the next slide. Hi everyone, I'm Sudha. It's nice to see all of you here, and we're just running through the next couple of side events that Gibbon did. So the other side event was on vital role of youth in environmental and peace building efforts. So this was given that the theme of COP16 was peace with nature, and following up of on our efforts of involving these important conversations into COP and CBD discussions since 2022, since COP15, we continued that effort and that push for these discussions to happen in biodiversity spaces. So this event was important because we were able to launch two documents. One on how one was a training toolkit for young people on how to integrate conflict sensitive approaches into their on ground actions, and the second was a case studies document which gives you case studies on three of our given national chapters, the work they're doing, and how they've identified ways to integrate a conflict sensitive lens into their actions. So these two documents will be made available to you following the following this outcomes webinar, and we would encourage all of you to take a look at it, and you would definitely find it useful. So apart from the launching of the two documents, we had a panel discussion, as you can see from the image, where we had youth representatives and representatives from NGOs and other diverse stakeholders, where they discussed the importance of young people at environmental peace building efforts, and also how conflict sensitive approaches need to be mainstreamed in the implementation of the KMGPF. So quite a lot of important ideas, discussion points came out of this panel discussion. The second was a Crafting a Better Future Oceans Day closing session. Now, this was a very different and unique session that Gibbon led for as a closing day for Oceans, as a closing session for the Oceans Day. And this was done along with the CBD Secretariat. And it was more of a participatory theatre format where a lot of our Gibbon members acted the acted our relationship with nature and how oceans and how it's changing over the course of over the course of the decade and more than that. So in this, we also presented our youth priorities document on specifically related to the ocean to the minister from Costa Rica. And this was significant because the United Nations Ocean Conference is happening next year in Nice in France. Next slide. Yeah, so these are the last two events that again Gibbon led. One was Weaving a Story with Mother Earth, and this was done with the Ministry of Environment, Japan, City of Yokohama, the Japan Biodiversity Fund, and the CBD Secretariat. And here we discussed the outcomes and challenges that young people face in terms of engaging them meaningfully. And this was also a space where we reflected upon our IYCB, the International Youth Summit that was held in Yokohama in August, and the key outcomes that came out of that summit and the meaningful next steps that we must take to make sure this momentum is kept forward and young people are engaged meaningfully in policy discussions as well as in on-ground actions. The last side event, not the side event, the last parallel event that Gibbon sort of led was a topic on youth financing. So it was called Deep Dive into Future Financing, Unleashing Youth Power for Climate and Biodiversity Action. So this was done along with the Nordic Council, the Nordic Youth Biodiversity Network, the Nordic Council of Ministers, and it was and I'm sorry, I think there's an overlap. Yeah. Uh, I think Alan, there's an overlap, I think, from the French interpreter. Yeah, I think now it should be fine. Yeah. So there was a we had two roundtable discussions, which was focused on youth finance mechanism. No. Mark, would you be able to help?
We can hear you, Sudha, but if
Okay,
could speak
No.
lower.
So just a second, we need to fix the interpretation
yeah, I
channels.
think the French.
So I don't know, Alan, can you please fix? I think our French interpretation is coming into the English channel, or maybe the French interpreter
Yes,
can.
both in English and Spanish were working.
Okay.
Okay, now can I go? Right.
Robert,
So the
Roberto, can
final.
you try to switch to the French channel? I think you're in the English channel. Hopefully it's fixed.
Okay. Yeah. So this is just the last point. So this side event, sorry, this panel discussion or roundtable was held as two discussions focused on youth finance mechanism, barriers to funding access, and the ways in which youth funding can be, scaled up with synergies between exploring the synergies between biodiversity and climate finance. So this was quite critical, especially for a lot of youth networks like Gibbon and organizations, because it is quite important topic, as we do find a significant barrier in terms of fund accessibility, and also the trust that comes along and the bureaucracy that comes along with accessing these funds. So this, we had participation from government representatives, youth, the Jeff, Ramsar Convention, NGOs and philanthropies. So it was quite a rich discussion on how where all of them discussed on how they could take steps to make sure youth can access these funds in a more inclusive and accessible manner, and what youth need to do in order to make sure we can access these funds or build the relationships and partnerships in order to make our process easier to access the funds. And I have to also thank a lot of our Gibbon members who helped with making these side events a success, especially for Mark, Marie, and a lot of other members part who were part and made sure that the side events went smoothly and were quite successful. So thank you.
Thank you, Sudha. Thank you, Shruti. Thank you for sharing all of the activities we did inside events and parallel events. So as you can see, everyone, we did a lot of discussions on different thematic areas revolving biodiversity. So we had a good conversations on peace, in financing, in indicators, and in food systems. So those are kind of like good discussions as well during COP16. And one last thing that's really huge in COP16 is the communications part that we did for COP and for all of our stakeholders and participants and communities as well. And here with us is Aurora to share with us the updates on communications regarding COP16. Aurora, please.
Hi everyone. First of all, really thank you for all the people that support us, that help us, since Fatima, Alan, Andrea, who help us to articulate to, in general, the activities of communication before and after the COP. So our activities during the COP will be articulated in that way. Also, the people there that help us to also support the rest of the activities, because finally communication was something that was happening at the same time and supporting the rest of our activities and presence. People like Seth, like Briggs, and all the people that get involved helping us to recollect these different activities, photos, create media, create even videos. Also with the altar thing that even help us to separate the seats to make this beautiful thing in the floor. So everyone who get involved, really thank you. And finally, what was our main objective was consolidate Given as the leadership and the reference in youth mobilization and participation for biodiversity issues. And for that, we were promoting the visibility of young people as active citizens and strengthening an inclusive, informed global community that we are. Also, how we want to integrate the narratives that we generate as community and as Given at COP in general in all our strategy. to also enhance long-term impact, not just something that pop up during the COP and then end. And the main team that created this were Rebe and I, but all these other people that I already mentioned that help us and really help us to cover everything at the same time during the COP. Next slide, please. So after we identified that objectives, the things that we want to address was first integrate all the narratives that we generate during the COP with the general flow that our communication had before and after the COP for given in general. Also foster and strong our community as a community that it's informed and that it's inclusive, that it's supportive. We know that in general, COPs can be something really hard to pass. It's also an ecosystem that can put a lot of pressure in us, our expectations as young people that arrive to these places. Also, how we interact with so many different groups and organizations and circumstances, and at the end, the main key of be there as a community. It's also the opportunity to reflect and identify what makes us given, and also came back with more energy, with more commitment, and also feeling not so lonely, even when we know that the decisions in this process not always are what we want. So for that, we have this objective to strengthen our community. And at the end, also what we want outside, right? That it's a position youth and given for the reference of youth in engagement and mobilization in biodiversity for external audiences. Basically, that other youth can find our community, that governments be more inclusive and start to ask and want to include more youth. And also these partners that we know that we can find in these places, that we are happy to have this support, right? So it's an opportunity. So the ones that are already supporting us be sure that they are taking a good decision, and other potential partners can also find us. So for that, I invite Rebecca to share with us how we address all these different objectives during the COP. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Laura, and hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca from Ecuador, and it's important to say that I'm from Ecuador because in the COP, I met my other Rebecca colleague from Mexico. So, and I just want to, before letting you know the COP results, I just want to, again, highlight the words of Aurora. Thanks to everyone that comes to us and said us like, I just have like this day for helping you with comms. What can I do? Because even though when we have like no much time during the COP or yes, we receive a lot of support for all of these good work. So thanks to all the people that came to us for helping and that wanted to give us support, a volunteer support. So thinking in all the objectives that Aura said, we have event coverage, photos, social media stories, saying what we were doing in the youth pavilion, in the youth rooms, in the side events, the official side events. We also managed to think also to make cultural experience exchange. We saw also this beautiful part of art in our youth pavilion. We try to make also audiovisual materials to support the strategic needs for action. This means videos, photographs. Even though when most of you didn't saw it in our Instagram, they were like published in other spaces also, like NGOs that wanted and came for us for having support also from our youth voices. BTL type activities at the youth pavilion. This means like supporting these youth pavilion activities in actions, in photographs, but also trying to keep it order, to keep of more people coming and new and what we were doing. Position materials, this means that helping to make and create, since the creation and design of cards and business cards, pins, banners, brochures, whatever, and also print them and bring it also to the COP. Press accompaniment, this means like press conference and follow up with the journalists, since making the media kit for the press to keep doing like the all of the other work with journalists, having interviews. We are going to see them before, also like our highlights. The creation also of free press kits, and also, these other kind of activities that you could saw in our Instagram, but also the component of the other position materials for this stuff. Can we put the next, please? So these are the key outcomes from the COP. We have like 50 events, digital covered, the creation of a common channel for knowledge management. Most of you have like this Telegram chat. If not, you're more than welcome to come to our Telegram chat and put like all the pictures, but also all the videos and all the important information, because we want to keep doing, this storage of photographs, audiovisual material to support the strategic needs and action. As we said, we have like some important videos for keep moving, these highlights and positionment highlights also. The altar of death at the youth pavilion, which was one of our favorites. So thanks again, and thanks again for the Mexico team who helped us to doing it. We had 3 press conferences, and when we said like all the accompaniment of press, means like main also the media and the communication ideas before the press conference, but also, when we have a press conference, we have a lot of journalists that comes to us and said like, when we have interviews with the youth, so our part was also to keep contact with them, to help in the interviews built by European, Latin American media and international organizations. And also we aim to have like the regional dialogues with international NGOs to promote our vision in the youth COP, as youths. And especially we have like this also materials, position materials, like the cards, like the pins and banners and brochures that we could saw like during all of these 2 weeks of work. So that from our side. Thanks again to all the team that help us to do these processes.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Aurora. I think of the ofrenda is also one of my favorite during COP. It was really nicely done. Thank you so much, and thank you for the big effort of really doing this communication work. And you can see how many side events and events you have really covered, and we know that it's really hard to do it during the busy day at COP. Thank you so much. And as you can see, these are all the activities that we did complementing the negotiations while we are at COP. We did Youth Pavilion, we did the Youth Day, we had actions, and of course, a very big communications campaign that we did to make sure that the youth are being seen across the globe in terms of their engagements in COP16. So that good job, everyone. And now I would like to open the space for questions or thoughts, or if you have feelings you wanted to share to the community as well, you are welcome to do so. You can raise your hand so we could acknowledge you during this session. We are now open for questions for everyone. Please, do you have any questions? Please raise your hand.
Can I have a question, please, Mark?
Yes, please go ahead. Introduce yourself and
Yeah.
specific
Yeah.
person the question to.
Yeah,
Go
I'm
ahead.
Abhishek Dhomik from India. What I'm asking is that I'll not be going by the COP and other things. What I'm saying is that uh, the Scouts and Guides, the international movement for Scouts and Guides, they do have the provision for resilience of climate, nature, and biodiversity action plan, implementing the youths to be a part of that. So, are you people trying to coordinate with them in this area. And another thing is that in the World Species Congress that happened in New Zealand this year only, so there was the discussion of setting up of task forces in the respective regions of the world concerning to the area of biodiversity conservation. So how effective these are going on right now? That's it, my question.
Thank you,
Hello.
Abhishek, for Thank you for your questions. Do we have someone from the team who can answer the questions from Abhishek? Maybe Ether or Sefa regarding the questions, or anyone from the policy team who would like to also share their thoughts regarding the question.
Maybe just on the first one, is that, yeah, indeed, like we have partnered with the Scouts and the Scout movement before, especially because of the alignment, of course, with, and caring for the environment and things like that. We have partnered with them before. I don't think there's any active partnership right now at the global level, but perhaps some national chapters can also share if they have been partnering with Scouts. But yeah, I think that's a good, um, it's a good movement that aligns with ours, and I think, yeah,
And
we can continue.
One thing I should add is that the particular areas of adventure sports, basically the gliding, the areas of mountaineering, the hiking, these are basically the areas where, and scuba diving and all these things, they are basically the areas and the aspects which are covering the respective terrains, the geographical, topographical areas of concern where they have the fragile ecosystems, and their local people over there, they do have their own indigenous cultural knowledge systems. So if more people are being ventured into these areas to get more exposure, like areas of speleology, the cave expeditions, so people will be more concerned about the particular fragile ecosystems dwelling over those places, and they can be more aware of the things, and the conservation aspect can be a bigger one. So if the COP policies, the GIBN objective should be like to incorporate, to include the areas of national, adventure sports in this regard. That will be very much helpful as well. That's what the Scouts and Guides does as well. And the concerned areas of research activities uh, all through the world does even that thing. And we do have our own ecological task force in the defense sectors of India and other respective parts of the world. They are also working collaboratively in these areas as well. Like NATO is working inclusive of all the regions together for the area of ecological task force activities. So these things might be of help for every one of us. That's my
Thank
observation
you.
right now.
Thank you, Abhishek. We'll keep that in mind, and perhaps in the future, if there is an
Yes,
opportunity,
yes. There are
we will
multiple areas to
also.
work upon. Yes.
Um,
Thank you. Thank you.
So for again, we would like to open the space for the questions. Just a bit of a reminder. Please speak slowly so that the interpreters can really process and interpret your questions very well. Thank you, everyone. Do we have any more questions regarding the discussions for today? Or maybe perhaps some thoughts or feelings or realizations that you also want to share? We are open for that as well during this time. And you could also put them in the chat if you're not able to speak. Yes, Eric, you can ask your question now. Please speak slow for our interpreters. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Mwesichi. I'm from Rwanda. Really, I would like to thank you for this discussion. So, really, I have learned a lot from this meeting, and actually, that's what I wanted to tell you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. We appreciate that as well. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Do we have any more who would want to ask questions or thoughts or reflections regarding the session for today? All right. It looks like we don't have anyone who would want to ask or share. Then if no one, then we move to the next slide, please, Sefa. All right. Again, if you wanted to learn more about the discussions for today, there are resources available in the internet, and we will send you the link of these resources in the chat so you could access them if you wanted to learn more of the decisions and the other important documents of COP16 during and the last sessions in October. Thank you for setting that in the chat, Safa and Fatima. Okay, so what happens next after this webinar? So of course, what Safa mentioned to everyone, we will be sharing the report of the outcomes and all of the other activities that we shared with you in a bit more of a detail in a COP16 report. And like what Aether also mentioned, the continuation of the negotiations for COP16 will be happening next year in Rome on February. So we will be also actively be engaged in that negotiations as well as part of the community who's really pushing forward youth priorities in terms of biodiversity work. And of course, we always encourage everyone who are in this community and to those who are actively doing their youth work in biodiversity to really push forward the meaningful engagement of youth in your LBSAP revisions. So if you would look into your country's efforts in the revisions and the updating of the LBSAP, it's good to always um, be engaged on that. And we also encourage everyone to continue their amazing work in your conservation work as part of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework implementation. So hopefully you're able to do more in the KMGBF implementation side as we are now looking more into that in the next years. And of course, we have been sharing with you our social media accounts. So we send that on your chat. So if you wanted to learn more, you could follow those media platforms and also follow us on our social media handles if you wanted to learn more of our work and if you wanted to be more engaged in youth work in biodiversity. And that's about it. Thank you everyone for having the time to be with us. And thank you to our interpreters who have done a good job interpreting our session for today. And thank you to our presenters. Thank you to our policy team led by Aether and Safa. And thank you, of course, to Fatima for co-moderating. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gretel, Andrea, Aurora, Rebecca, and to all those who have presented today. And we'll see you soon. And hopefully, follow us so you could learn more of our other work. Thank you, everyone. See you.
Bye
Thank you,
bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.
Um,
Thank you
Thank you.
so much, Mark, everyone.